How would you define the word culture?
The environment and experiences around you that define how you feel and think.
A group of people's beliefs and where and how they live.
Culture is what defines human interaction, standards within subcultures, and how those subcultures interact with one another, as well as individual morals and behaviors. Our group decided to interview our parents because they come from a variety of different cultures, each with unique perspectives, some who've migrated to the US from countries with vastly different cultures with the hopes of creating better lives for themselves. The experience of being immersed in two different cultures has given them a particular outlook on what cultures represents within a society.
The way people act towards each other is different. The food, the education, it's just everything is different.
Directly experiencing significant cultural differences grants insight as to how human beings can behave so differently as a result of the environment in which they were raised. The nurturing that a child receives growing up can contribute to success in life, and certain behaviors can be ingrained at a young age.
Overall, my first job was a mechanic at Tryout Golf Course.
I was a waitress at Ponderosa.
Several of our parents have moved to the United States from countries with much larger wage gaps between the poor and the wealthy. For them, the only way to succeed in life was by working hard and taking advantage of the opportunities that they had.
You feel a lot like the government controls you. I don't think you'll understand, and you can't appreciate what you already have until you've lost it. I started with not having that, and that made it very difficult because we didn't have a lot of opportunities. You didn't have Social Security, you didn't have welfare, you didn't have any of those things. Even the homeless people here in this country looks to me like they have more than the homeless people over there, for example. Because we have all this nonprofit organizations in our country. In Colorado Springs alone, there's thousands of them here who can help those people.
Conflict theory is a theory that the people within a society are always competing amongst each other for a limited amount of resources, which could lead to wealth and power. As a result, wealthier people are incentivized to limit the number of opportunities for the impoverished to rise from poverty. This inequality of opportunity among countries is what has driven so many to move to the United States in search of a better life, and for many, the risk has paid off.
Okay, so when people say that they come to America for the American dream, that is real. There's so much more opportunity here, there's so much more chances to make it in life, whereas in the Philippines there's a wage gap, and people who are in poverty tend to stick in poverty just because of all the corruption and stuff. I definitely see how it didn't change my view of the Philippines, but it definitely made me realize like the differences in America and the Philippines.
We have more things here. If you want to work towards something better here in this country, it's not impossible.
Although the United States may have more opportunities than lesser developed countries, that doesn't mean moving here is easy. Cultural differences can take time to get used to, and many who move here experience culture shock as they struggle to adjust to varying behavioral expectations.
I experienced culture shock when I first moved here, and I was able to remember and process what had happened, because I remember one time I went to Ruby Tuesdays and they gave me a utensils packet and it only had a knife and a fork, and that's when I realized that this is a different country.
Every culture has a code of conduct that its members must abide by in order to fit in and be productive within the community. Folkways are some of the more nuanced behavioral expectations in order to be accepted within a culture. These behaviors are often minor and may seem insignificant to outsiders looking in, but they are actually crucial to the members within the culture. These can include behaviors like using a firm grip during a handshake, looking someone in the eyes during a toast, or gesturing to show respect for an elder. For example, a folkway that my family practices in the Filipino culture is holding out a pronated hand, and you must press your forehead to their hand to ask for a blessing. This gesture is called mano, which translates to hand in Spanish. If one were to not greet their elder in this way, it would be considered disrespectful and looked down upon in Filipino culture. My twin sister Ashley describes the interaction between the youth and the elderly, as well as demonstrates it for us.
My family, we're all 100% Filipino. We keep traditions. Like, we have this thing to show respect to our elders where when you see an elder like a grandpa or your dad or something, you take their hand and you bless them. It's called blessing, like that. Most people would hug their parents or whatever, but the tradition in the Philippines is to bless them.
Symbolic interactionism emphasizes the subjective meaning assigned to various behaviors. Different cultures often associate symbolic meaning towards behaviors observed within their community. For example, religion is considered a strong value in most places around the world. In the Philippines, the major religion is Catholicism, and when driving by a church, it is custom to make the sign of a cross. In Jamaica, the major religion is Christianity, and almost every store is closed on Sundays while families practice their beliefs and enjoy each other's company over a large meal. In America, however, stores are often open during these days of worship, and religion is not held as highly, but some places are still closed on Sundays and people still go to worship. It is apparent that although most cultures practice religion, the ways in which they regard religion can vary a great amount. Growing up in a specific community can also have an effect on the way individuals perceive life.
So, what was your childhood like?
It was pretty simple, laid back, non-stress. We were poor.
You're poor.
I had a big family. There was 7 brothers and sisters.
It's very different in here. I was 10 when I left, so I was a child when I lived there, and we're a lot more privileged here in the U.S. than over there. Life was simple. There's pros and cons. We didn't have a lot of things over there, but it just seemed like we enjoyed our time more. We weren't rushed. Kids weren't like, oh, let's go to this sports here, this and that. We were children. We were allowed to be children. We played outside. I didn't have toys. We didn't have toys. It's not just me. I don't recall all my friends having like all these toys. Video games wasn't the thing at that time. We played outside. We climbed trees. We played hide and seek. We invented, and it was really fun.
Culture is such a broad topic to discuss, and when people begin to relate to one another, there comes a sense of unity between those individuals. For instance, Jordan's mom was part of a subculture in Japan where children created a culture of embracing differences. There is real culture, the norms and behavior that actually exist, inversely related to ideal culture, the norms of behavior hoped for. Most real culture does not align with ideal culture because not everyone in the world hopes for the same thing. Jordan's mother, who was adopted from the Philippines by a U.S. military man, shares her experience in Japan, where what would be considered an ideal culture was actually a real culture within a multiracial discourse community.
In Japan, that was like my best years over there. It was a military community. It's kind of like a small town, but you had culture. Not like small town in the US and that was it. You didn't know any other culture. But there you did. So you didn't look at people like, oh, they're black, or oh, they're Asian, oh, they're Hispanic. You didn't look at that stuff. You didn't even think about that when I lived in Japan. To us, it was like, oh, you are half Korean, and let's go to your house and eat Korean food. We appreciated the culture and celebrated the culture. We weren't afraid of it. So I still look at it that way. I think it's because of how I grew up in Japan.
In America, there are countless subcultures that come together, culminating in the culture we call American culture today. Each individual part of American culture contributes to a complex, intermingling web of culture, commonly called a melting pot. The term melting pot perfectly describes the U.S. because people from lesser developed countries move here in mass numbers in search of opportunities that don't exist in their home countries. The U.S. is known as a land of equal opportunity, which is appealing to many people around the world, some of those being our parents. Jordan's mom, Chris Ann's dad, and Allison's parents were people from completely different places who migrated to the U.S. in hopes of providing their families with a better life. When people choose to come here, they tend to bring a part of their original culture with them. This results in a formation of subculture, where people form groups which share their values and norms, while the overall culture of the US is to live a life of happiness and financial stability. The insight we gained from interviewing our relatives has taught us much about the significance of understanding cultural differences, as well as the importance of embracing our own cultures. We were fascinated to discover how each of us have our own cultural background, which shapes our own values and norms. Whether it's in your own town or halfway across the world, we encourage everyone to embrace cultural differences and actively seek to understand the importance of culture and how culture molds society, because cultural diversity can collectively strengthen us all to better the world for its future inhabitants.